Hi, everyone. My name is Leah Granger, and this is Curtain Call, a weekly interview series presented by FabCollab with powerful women in the arts. And we're coming to you today from Toronto. We are going to be speaking today with a fabulous writer, poet, sort of woman about town. If there was an option to be a woman about town these days. She's a poet, I would say, primarily. Books of poetry. They were named, one of them was named, Hi Tamara was named one of the best poetry books of the year by the National Post. There she is. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Linda. How are you? I'm just
To.
going through a bit of your biography here. It's
Oh,
quite
say on.
quite impressive, if I do say so myself. When you put it all together and just sort of like rattle off some of your credentials. Linda writes for The Guardian, The Atlantic, The Globe and Mail, The Walrus, Hazlitt, En Route, and Real Life, which I'm not familiar with.
Oh, it's like a very smart and like it's for people in the know and people who
Oh,
don't know what they're talking about, but somehow fake it well enough to get in there.
oh,
It's
so
like
that's
about it's like a tech and culture magazine. I feel like it is definitely too smart for the likes of me, but
me
they
also.
have. What's that?
I said me also, apparently,
Yes.
for all of us.
It's
How are
like
you
all
doing?
people with PhDs in like
Yeah.
internet theory. Like it's crazy. I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. How about you?
I'm good. I know you're just across the city from me, but it's been a while since we've seen
Yeah,
each other. Wow.
like a little bit of this, but like in a very digital way. So your eyeballs actually cannot go like this. Yeah, no, I know. I haven't been like outside my neighborhood in what feels like forever.
Well, we're all there, but this is one way that people can connect in the meantime. And I know you really well. Me and Linda met
You
more
think
than
you
a decade
do.
ago. Yeah, well, I do. I do. We met like in 2008, interning at the Walrus. We were so young and innocent and naive then. And look at us now. But I want to give everybody else a chance to get to know you a little bit. So maybe could you just like start by telling me a little bit about like your journey to becoming a writer? Like, was this something that you were doing like new as a child, like, or were you like were you already writing poetry when you were super young, or did you foresee yourself like being something else? Like, where did all this come from?
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like I just was like born a huge nerd and like I just from the womb was like basically obsessed with words, obsessed with language. And like, yeah, I never wanted to be anything else. Like, I feel like I was unlucky in the sense that this is like a very poor idea of a career if you want to actually make money. But also, I think just, I think you are lucky if you know what you want to do from a young age. So yeah, no, I mean, I always wrote poetry even when I was a little kid, and I feel like I maybe when I was the most young, I wanted to be a playwright. I really liked theater,
Really?
plays. Yeah, and I
That is
mean, I did.
so nerdy.
Yeah, it is really nerdy, and I mean,
Like,
I
how
did
many
do
kids are there
one.
that like that want that? That's amazing.
Isn't that weird? You feel like little kids don't want to be playwrights.
Yeah, I mean, that is kind of what I think.
um,
That is
yeah,
wonderful.
we just like I feel like my because we put on a lot of plays when I was little. Like we went camping with this other family every summer, and every summer the four of us kids would like put on a show.
Yeah,
And yeah, that seemed to me like that's what you're supposed to do with your life.
but you
Um,
went home, you like write it down? Like, did you write plays when you were young or?
I mean, those plays, I feel like there weren't actual scripts. Like we were yeah, we were more so young enough that you're just like remembering what you said before. But no, I mean, I actually did put on a fringe play when I was like in my early 20s, and it was real bad. But it was super fun to do. Like I got all my friends to be in it, and you know, my other friend
Was
to
it
direct it. This
was
was
it just
in both Montreal and Toronto.
okay?
We because you have to like enter a lottery, right? And I feel like in
Mhm.
Montreal, I guess we won. I think maybe actually here in Toronto we won the lottery, and we were at Factory. And in
Oh,
Montreal, there was an option to like bring a venue somehow, so we convinced Theatre St. Catherine, which is like I hope it's still there, is like a small black box theater on St. Catherine to let us do it. Yes, it was extremely poorly attended. And it was whatever. It was cool. It was a fun experience. We all got in crazy fights,
totally.
scenery broke and like catapulted people onto the floor. Like it was, yes, it was a real mess. But I think everyone should like fail really horribly in public, like at least once, like when you're young. Just give you a taste for disaster.
Yeah, and then also you like learn, get a little bit of resilience,
Yeah, I
and
think it's
you
like
got that, I think, for sure.
I think this is a thing. Like for sure, when I do teach a little bit, and I definitely kind of counsel people to just like get excited for rejection. Like you have to really kind of embrace it. You have to send stuff out, and people will say no to you. And I mean, it definitely doesn't feel good, but I think you do have to get used to it.
How do you like develop? Because like that is such a big part of being a writer. Like, how do you know that like when you're getting rejected or people like aren't liking your work? Like art is so subjective. Like, how did you get to a point where you had enough of a sense of like your own work that you could do that and like hear feedback and still think, well, I know that this is like good. You know, did it take
Yeah.
time, or did you always have that confidence in what you were doing?
I mean, that is like an interesting question. I mean, I guess like I would say, because I mean, I did do, I feel like my first experience of like showing people my work was probably in undergrad. Like
Mhm.
I always wrote stuff in high school, but like, even though my friends were nerds, I feel like they were more like math and science nerds. Like they're all sort of doctors and accountants now. So I didn't really have anybody to show my writing to. So I feel like when I was in my undergrad was when I first took like, I only took one creative writing class. And I don't know, I guess like it always seems to me like, what I always also say, I guess, when I teach is like you should listen to what everyone says and nod politely and like ask them what they mean. But like you certainly don't have to do any of that stuff. Like I feel like people's advice is not gonna always be right for you. Like no question. And I think in contexts where you are seeing also other people's work, you can just kind of
Mhm.
tell if somebody what they are interested in and their sort of project just has nothing to do with what you are doing. Like, I guess I would say the criticism I received most often when I was starting out was that my work was like too clever. People don't like it if you act like, if your thing is too complicated and like, oh, you use too many words I don't know, like those kinds of
Yeah, or
criticisms.
conceptually like, you know, yeah,
Yeah.
advanced. I just
Yeah.
have to say, it's so funny the thing that you say about like about being like about nodding about people's criticism because I feel like you so do that. Just everyone goes to be at different places, so you'll be like, uh-huh. You're like, and yet,
Oh my God,
and
that's so
it's good.
funny.
It's like you do like you know what I mean. It's like yes, that is like a great way to communicate. It's like to listen and take it in, and then be like, maybe, but maybe
Yeah, I
not.
mean, I feel like I mean, I really like getting criticism. Like for me this is like actually a really important part of my process. Like I've always since I started like knowing other people who made art. I've always sought out groups to share my work with and like trade with, and like I feel like one thing that's been nice actually during the pandemic is I feel like in a weird way, because I can't go to literary events, I've just been like more actively kind of emailing my friends and being like, what are you working on? Can I read it? Do you need like feedback? And people are always like, yes, oh my God. So I feel like it has been nice to have that sort of as part of my like creative life right now, to be really like reading people's first drafts of like what they're working on and like trying to help them. Like I find that is like just the funnest part.
What has your creative life been like over the past year? Because when I think, I mean, I know for myself my work as a writer is like mostly at home by myself anyways. So, but I mean, life has been dramatically, but yeah, like how has it affected like your like creative life as a writer?
Yeah. Well, yeah, in some ways, yes, because also I was working from home before the pandemic anyway, and like all that kind of, you are so often doing your job like through the phone or over the internet or whatever. But I mean, yeah, I feel like one of the weirdest things was that I started like literally the week before the pandemic was declared. I started this new project that's supposed to be like portraits of people, like poetry, but poetic portraits of my friends. And like my whole idea was that I was going to go around and like interview people and get them to like sit for me and do like poses, and like that I would sit and generate text while I'm in the person's presence, and then also go away and do stuff with it. And I literally did like one, and then it was like, now you can never see anyone ever again. So I feel like that it's
Which
really
project
weird.
is this?
Yes,
Tell me more. Tell me more about that.
certainly. I would be delighted. The tentative title of this project, which is like so new, it's ridiculous to even talk about it, sort of, but I'm gonna talk about it anyway. The tentative title is I Am Going to Write About You. And it's kind of like an engagement with, I feel like for me, partly because I also work as a journalist, I just like, obviously, like, you spend so much time sort of angsting about what is an appropriate level of writing about other people, and like what are okay things to say about other people. Like, oh, this person said this thing in an interview, but do they, even though they knew we were in this context, like, is it gonna upset them if I quote them? Like, should I not say this thing? Or like, what about this other, it's like you're very, you're just like very aware that people are trusting you, and that they are trying to be honest with you and share with you, but that you are in control of how that person is going to come across in like a really real way. And that even if you present them, even if you just show a transcript of what they said, they will feel probably offended, or like you are making them look bad, because also people hate themselves. Like, they don't like to hear their actual quotes, and everyone thinks they look stupid and sound stupid, and like you try to reassure them that like everyone is stupid, but like, when it's you feel bad.
It's always surprising to how much people that aren't like practiced with the media, it always blows my mind the things people will say to me, the things that people will share, knowing that you're a journalist, that people are so open and will say things that are like, I'm like, you probably don't want me to write that though, right? Yeah, and then you're like, so do I? Or yeah, it's very tricky.
Yeah, I mean, I think like representation is just like an interesting problem. And I mean, I think like obviously I wouldn't work in media or making art if I didn't think that creating artistic representations of the world was positive. Like, I yeah, like I mean, So sorry. So this project is kind of like I'm doing a thing where like each piece is a diptych, so it has two parts, and one part is I do an interview with the person I'm writing about to obtain their consent to write about them, and we talk about what that means to them. Like, do they feel that this is something they can consent to? Like, what does that mean? What kind of limits do they want to place on what I can and can't say about them? Like, are there things that they like? What does it mean to them to have someone else represent them, and how does that make them feel? And then I take the transcript of that interview and I turn it into a poem that's all plucked from what they said. So it is sort of a found poem. And then in addition, I write a portrait poem that is sort of like about them slash to them, that is sort of may be related to that consent transcript, but might be just totally different. And then there's sort of some other stuff where I use the text from those interviews and do other poems out of them. So yeah, it's kind of like it's kind
Is
of
the
really
idea
tempting.
is the idea like is part of it that the portrait that you make from the conversation about consent, like following like what they asked you to do, like what they consent to,
Yeah,
or
I
no?
mean, I wouldn't put anything in the poem that they've said don't write
Right.
about X. You know what I mean? I mean, I feel like it's crazy to me. I mean, I guess because I'm doing this with people I am close with.
Yeah.
Everybody has been like, say whatever you want, I trust you, you know, which to me is like the most terrifying, you know.
Right.
Like I did an interview right before this, like a journalism interview, and I feel like the person was like, "Oh, I trust you," and I was like, "You shouldn't." Like you should talk to me. It's gonna be okay, but also like, you know, it's
Yeah.
good to be a little bit
You shouldn't really trust anyone with. Yeah, I know.
maybe.
Your stories, it's like, yeah, who do you trust with your stories? And that's something that comes up. It's coming up more and more. Uh, like I find in my work, like in journalism, just in terms of like whose stories you can tell, has become so
Yeah.
fraught. It's like, oh, we want to be telling all of these diverse stories, but then I'm like, but can I? And then a lot of the times the answer is no. So yeah, that's a whole.
Yeah. I mean, I think when it comes to, because for sure, like in journalism, there are not as many rules as I would like. Like I sometimes wish there were more solid guidance about what is and isn't somehow like there, if as if there were some real sort of code of ethics. It's always sort of floaty. But I feel like in art, it is certainly even more so the case that, um, I mean, you know, it's like we accept things in art that we wouldn't accept in journalism, and that is like I think positive, but it does mean you just have to take a lot of responsibility for what you do and what you make. And I
And
think sorry, go
I
on.
feel like you do a lot of writing that's like it's journalism, but a lot of it they're like essays where you're doing a bunch of research and then you're kind of like, and here's what I think this means, which is like, yeah, isn't it some ways like it's you know you're not like it's not like you're reporting like a like crime that happened or something, you know, you're like here are some ideas about like so and so, and here's what I think, which I always think is so interesting. Like you do this more than I do, more this kind of work, but like sometimes it's something that you don't know anything about, right? To begin with, right? Like you get and you're like, yeah, they want me to write about like whatever, like blank, and you're like, well, I went to the library, and then you're like at the end supposed to like profess some sort of like opinion, yeah, which is like I find that interesting, like that the role of that journalist, which is basically like you're smart. They're like you're smart. You need a few things about this, and like tell us what you think.
No, I know.
It's pretty awesome, but it's just kind of like it's like when you step back. Like when I first was like getting into journalism and was like, oh, that's like a thing, that's like a role that the journalist plays. I was like, huh, that's weird.
No, I know. I mean, I feel like sort of like, yeah, like the sort of essayistic stuff that I often am doing. I mean, I agree. It is sort of weird in the sense that also I don't have like a specialty. Like I don't have a beat. So I'm very frequently sort of yeah, like this magazine is like, let's write about animal law, and I'm like, okay. And then but like I don't know anything about this. So, you know, I had to for a piece recently I had to learn all about how the law in Canada treats rabbits when they are for farming versus when they're in laboratories, and like, you know, all these regulations about like cage size and like how sick your feet are allowed to get because, you know, standing in cages is like bad for rabbits' feet. And then yeah, and of course it's like then you are presenting this material as if you are some kind of expert, which is weird. And I mean,
But then at that point, it's like you're kind of like the skill that you have is like being able to find the people that know and then talking to them, and then they just kind of tell you, you know, and you
yeah,
are able to like, present it to people that didn't get to talk to those people. Is
yeah.
like a very reductive way of looking at it. There's more to it than that.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess like I
And what
think
about
like
piece four? Sorry to
oh,
interrupt you, but
that piece was for a magazine called Beside, which is like a sort of outdoors magazine. Like they are sort of like, yeah, like they're kind of, they do a lot of stuff about like different ways in which you can go outside and do activities and like nature, but in a cultural, from a sort of through the lens
yeah,
of weird,
I've seen it.
smarty
Yeah.
culture types, you know?
Oh,
So yeah, I mean, that was interesting. It was interesting to like interview rabbit farmers and like interview people who, you know, do stuff around sentience and the law and like all this kind of
mhm.
jazz. And I mean, I would sort of say, even though I feel like you're often kind of, I feel like pieces get framed as like opinion, or there's like, I think there is a lot of appetite for things that are labeled opinion. I'm not so sure that
Mhm.
I come out with like super strong opinions usually, because
Yeah.
once you start reading about something and you learn about it, you're like, oh, this is kind of complicated, you know? And I
Mhm.
feel like to me, my role is to be like, here are these different elements. Here's,
Mhm.
I think for the animal piece, like I was kind of like, here's how I feel right now. I'm definitely not trying to say this is the way things need to be. I'm not, it's not sort of polemical, I guess. Like they are sort
Mhm.
of more thinky, gentle thinky.
That sounds interesting. I want to check it out.
Yeah.
Fun how you get to. Sorry that I'm talking so much about journalism stuff. It's like what I relate to you on, but I want to
Yeah.
jump to your poetry. And can you tell me a little bit about magnetic variations?
I
Because
can
this is a
even show
conceptual.
you a little bit about it. Okay, so this is my second book. Um,
Nice.
and it came out in like 2017. I feel like that was a billion years ago now. But it always takes me a billion years to write a book. Like between my first and my second book, it took like 6 years. So in that book, I have this series called Magnetic Variations on 1 and 6. And basically, this also actually comes out of my journalism practice. I had a column for a while where I was reading scientific studies every week and just like reporting on them and just chatting about different studies I had seen. And I read this one study about synesthesia, which is the
Mhm.
brain function where you, for example, if you have grapheme color synesthesia, it's like when you see the letter R, it might be red for you. The letter Q might be green for you. Like people have these connections between colors and letters, and this is like it's something that a lot of people have a feeling about. Like I think a lot of people I talk to be like, oh yeah, I totally feel like A is red, you know, which I agree with.
Mhm.
But some people just like have like it's just more visceral. It's like an actual sort of sense experience rather than like a association. So I read the study that was about this brain function, which people had always assumed was completely just sort of idiosyncratic. Like usually you and I were both synesthetes, but we don't, our color letter associations usually don't match up. So the
Right.
study that I read was a demonstration that this can be a learned phenomenon. And the way that they demonstrated this was that they had found 11 different synesthetes with grapheme color synesthesia that matched up. And it matched up in this very specific way, which was like A is red, B is orange, C is yellow, D is green, E is blue, and so on. And it matched when you look, and then it would repeat. So it went sort of like through the rainbow, ending on F, I believe, and then repeated again. So they found that all of these people had those, do you remember those Fisher Price like color magnets that you put on your
Well,
fridge?
in fact, that's
Yes.
what I think of this. Yeah. Hey,
So it
Jeff,
turned out,
go on.
so it turned out all of these people with these matched up associations had these color magnets as kids. So this was like the sort of the first time they demonstrated that there can be like a learned component to this. So I just like got really interested in this. I got really interested in playing with the sets that these color associations create. So it's like, because it cycles through the alphabet, it's like every sixth letter is the same color. And then, so for example, so then I started playing with words that contain those letters, like from a certain set. So for example, this is my orange set, which the letters are B, N, H, T, Z. And can you see that? It's like,
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
and so I
That is
spent hours and
cool.
hours like putting together these word lists where I just looked for words that contained one or more of these letters. So that's like that's when it's one letter set. Then I moved on to words that combine letters from two letter sets. So for example, this is the orange and the blue. The blue letter set is EKQW, a very difficult letter set to work with. And these are words that have one or more letters from those sets. And it's still like at this point, it's still pretty easy to find words that contain one or more of these letters. But as it moves on, it's like, here's the three or more. And it starts to be like, you need a lot of the letters to get colored in. And here's like four or more. You're really constrained in the kind of words. They have to be, the words end up being longer usually because they need to contain all these letters. Then this is like the fives. Like there's still a few letters in pen. You can see those L's because I haven't incorporated the purple letter set yet. But it's like you're more and more constrained in the words that will fit these constraints. And then this is the final. Every letter in any word that can be used must contain 6 letters or more to represent all the sets. And
Right.
it's chock-a-block like this.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah, it was really, really,
How did
really
you
fun.
do it? Like, how did you find the words? What was your process for that?
So like some of it was internet I forget what the word is people use. There's like internet aided poetry or whatever. Some of it I used Scrabble word finders. Like if you go on the internet, you can find a lot of these kinds of sites that attempt to help you make Scrabble choices. So you can plug in the letters that you want, and it will give you just like hundreds of thousands of words. I mean, in some cases, sometimes if your letter choices are really strange, really like low frequency letters. If you've got like Q, K, J,
Mhm.
go, then you do not get a lot of stuff. And so yeah, I would sit and I burn through like all these different like whoa, sorry,
You're good.
they're still over there, but I think you've all seen markers before, so I think we can take it as read. But yeah, I would like it's such a fun way to spend time. Like I really like working with formal constraints because I do really that sense like I feel like especially when you're working so in such a tactile way with
Mhm.
language and you're like I have you know my especially with the later ones where you've got a marker in every crease of your fingers and you've got your pen and you're like plucking out the markers to like create the words and like there's something so physical about it where I think people think of writing as like very sort of airy fairy mental. um
Absolutely. And you're like
yeah,
with pens with like ink all over you. But
yes.
you're like definitely like I feel like you're one of those people that was just really like born for this. Because you're like, I just love like working in constraints and like you know, okay, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I love constraints. I find constraints are my favorite. They just make it more fun, and I feel like they just like push you into weirder constructions. Like I feel like it is such a way to escape. You know, it's like my brain on its own, frankly, is not that interesting. It's a lot of the same stuff. It's like, should I eat oatmeal now or should I eat it in like an hour? I hate oatmeal. You know, like I don't want to read that. I doubt other people want to read about that either. But when you are pushed to use, you know, the word horizon, bandshell, and matzah together, now maybe you will come up with something.
And you did. I'm assuming. I don't know if those are random examples.
No, those are from the orange.
And did like, and what did like, what was the feedback that you got on this project?
Yeah,
Like, what do people, what do other writers think about this? Because yeah, it's like, there's a lot of people approach poetry in really different ways. And a lot of your work is like really conceptually interesting and like this and like has all these constraints and it's like based on this like larger idea about like form and some people's isn't so is different than that, right? So it comes from a different place. So how did people respond to this?
I mean, yeah, like, I mean, you know, I think I would say it's, I don't know what people said behind my back. Like, I mean, to my face, people seem to like it. I would say it's quite, it takes a lot of effort, I think, to actually, because there's a whole, in the notes section at the back of the book, there is, you know, like a quite lengthy explanation of like how it's done. And I think you kind of do need to spend a little time kind of scratching your head and being like, what do you mean? Before you can fully, I think, see what the patterns are. And I think for people who were, you know, are willing to spend that kind of time, I mean, I think I would say, if I can say this without it seeming immodest, like I think with this project, there's a kind of surface appeal where you just see the colors and you think that's so cool. Because I mean, when it was published, my publisher was Coach House Books, and like they were, this will be a little harder to see, but they were kind enough to print it in color, so you can kind
Mm-hmm.
of see it's all colored ink. And I mean, I think like there is a lot of delight you can gain just from the novelty aspect of seeing, you know, you're so used to seeing black and white, and it feels like that's the only way print can be presented. And to see something where the surface of it is sort of bedazzled in this way, that I think for people was cool. But I think like, yeah, for those who wanted to take a little more time and get like try to understand how it was constructed, I think those people obviously you get a little more out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, in some ways, like as much as like I think it does look cool in the book, I kind of prefer the loose
Marker.
leaf version because it's so much juicier, you know, like it really has like more dynamism. And I feel like on the in the sort of Smite's like 11-point print, I think it just is a little harder. And oh my God, it was so stressful trying to choose the Pantone colors because we couldn't,
Really?
it's expensive to print this. Like God bless Coach House for doing it. I think a lot of presses would not have been willing to do that. But I mean, one thing was we couldn't do a test run because it's just like too expensive. So I had
Oh,
to just like hope for the best with the like Pantone shades that I had chosen. And I mean, I did get a couple friends who are more so like design oriented than I am to help me, especially with the yellow, like trying to pick a legible yellow that you're going to print on like cream paper, you know? So I think like, I feel like when I was working on it, like one friend was like, well, you know, there's a reason why books are usually in black on white paper. And I mean, we can talk about that if you want. And I feel like afterwards I was like, I feel that I've done this experiment and I see why they do it in black. But I just wanted to check.
And it's like it becomes kind of an art project as well. Like they're very like frame like the marker ones are so cool.
Yeah, I mean, in my sort of like fantasy life, I feel like it would be cool to do a more so sort of, yeah, like in the art realm version of these.
They should sell them as prints or like as cards.
Yeah,
Because
I mean, they
when you sent
like
it
as
to me, I
raw
was
sheets or something.
awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it does sort of feel like there maybe is something to do with these like materials that would be cool. And I mean, maybe some point I will figure out how to do it. Yeah, I just sort of, I feel like it's sort of on me to like figure out what to do and do it. And I just sort of haven't.
Well, there's time. There's all the time in the world right now.
Do you want?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, could you read us something?
That's what I was going to ask if you wanted me to do. I
Mm-hmm.
can indeed. I can indeed read you something. Do you want me to read? I mean, like, what do you care, sort of? But like, do you want me to read one of the ones from that series, or do you want like a different one? Are you trying to like change the conversation, or are you trying to like?
I would love to hear one from that series, just because
Okay.
we've been talking about it. I'm very curious.
Okay.
I love to read. It's been a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long time for me too. Oh my gosh. I mean, I don't just sit here reading to myself. So this is gonna be a whole
Can you
thing.
imagine if you did, though?
I can't tell if that would seem awesome or if I would seem like so lame. Like I think probably just real lame.
It'd be fun for Tom.
Medium. Medium it would be. I'm just trying to decide whether to read the one I usually read or read a different one. I am. Oh yeah. I'm gonna read a different one from what I usually pick from this series. And like this one, sort of this is well, I'm still only using one set at a time, but it's sequential. So this is the green and then blue and then purple. You can kind of see it gives, can you sort of tell? It gives way at a certain point. The purple was also tricky to find like a good purple that would read in print. Okay, so this is from early on in the series. This is part of 1. Drunk, sporting jodhpurs under Dad's pullover, I'd leaned fjordwards, tumbled deep. I'd never visited Poseidon's weedy pavilion. Sodden laundry draped old Wavy's yard. Jilted didgeridoo players watched Jeopardy. Depressing. Vaporettos passed overhead, dumping corpses. Even drowning couldn't improve God's pimpled visage. Convulsed, washed up, Spat, I'd survived. Plover hovered over Jed's parked jalopy. Jewelweed quakes. Weasels easing skinks helter-skelter fears. Eloquent skeletons now. Woodpeckers encode warnings. When kennels squeak open, beasts howl. Hunters ride like jackknives. They skewer fleeing creatures. They hack necks open. Snakes writhe clockwise. Even hawks get weak-kneed. Be very quiet. Wear darkest cloaks. Hide inside thickest oaks. Squeeze Queen Terror down. We're sprawled where Russian thistle lifts from your neighbor's alfalfa. Still Ferris wheeling from our dimly remembered soiree, wearing unfamiliar haircuts, our unitards torn. Our reflexes waterlogged from years of reefer. Still, for fading rock stars, we're cheerful. Here's your affable butler's freckled brother, bringing coffee, smelling of lilac. Nearby, ultra-Orthodox girls playing softball. We're royalty, their first light.
Wow. It's like so terrifying for the first time.
I feel like
Really,
the blue was scary. There were a lot of scary words with a lot of like E's and like Q's and W's in them.
and when in there does it change color? Is it like after the parts? Wait, can I guess?
Sure.
Is it like after the part with the snakes?
Yes.
Because yeah, it's just like there because like yeah, there was like this real mood and like all of these images of like kind of very sort of terrifying, ominous, dark things, and then it sort of shifts.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is like you can hear the shift, like the tonal. I agree, there's like such a tonal shift,
Mhm.
and it's partly because the sounds change, right?
Right.
It's like that blue section with the snakes and the scary hawks and stuff. It's a lot of ease and things, and then
Right.
and even on the page, like I can really see it just looks very different. The shapes of the letters are different. Like there's just a whole sort of tactility to the language that I think the color kind of enhances and allows you to
Mhm.
notice some other stuff that was already there. But especially when you are repeating a letter set a lot, that those set of shapes start to really strike your eye on the page. And then when it gives way to the purple set was one of my favorites. It just has so many of my favorite letters in it. It's got R and F and L and X.
Mhm.
And when the F sounds come in, I really notice things like feeling more feathery, like it's got a more sort of pastoral feeling. So
What
yeah,
are in the first set you're reading?
the first set is the green set, which was a tricky set. It's got D, J, P, and V. So it's like it's like words like didgeridoo and Poseidon and
Right.
pullover. And I feel like, I struggled with green because I think partly I really just, because I mean, speaking like I'm not a synesthete, but we all, many of us kind of have some association between
Mhm.
letters and colors. And like for me, D is not green. I'm sorry. Like there's no
Mhm.
way that that's green. So it's like I found it hard to work with that set because you're trying to um, give like work with a character that you kind of don't believe in. It's like as if you had an actor on stage that you're like, no,
Not for you.
Yeah, I mean, I liked that set because I do feel like the words that come out of it are really interesting. But
Mhm.
I had a less set feeling about like what their character was, I guess. So yeah, so the green set is the sort of like drowning Poseidon, visiting Poseidon's
Mhm.
lair kind of set that ends with Plover hovered over Jed's parked jalopy, which is like I just like playing with those kinds of sounds.
It's really beautiful. And honestly, like, it's brilliant. There's so because there's
Thank
so
you.
many different there's just like so many different things that you're playing with at once and trying to make fit at the same time and tell some sort of story or create something evocative, which you do.
Yeah, I mean, in this sort of like, just to sort of be such a nerd for like a second, I feel like what was so interesting was just your grammar becomes very constrained as you move on because you lose very quickly the I. You can't use I because you could use it one time in the only time you could ever have it was in the yellow set because that is where the letter I belongs.
Right.
And then you're done. Like there's no other possibility for that to be part of your sentences. And I mean, very quickly you lose and, you lose the, like you don't have your usual grammatical tools to work with. So you're very quickly really, really pressed against the limits of syntax and grammar and like really brought back to just like subject, verb, object, you know. By the last piece, it's all sort of like people do X or like
Yeah.
squirrels do the following, you know, with a little bit of
You must have been
adverbs.
heaven by that point. So
Yeah,
constrained.
so constrained. Oh, loving it. Oh.
Well, it's amazing. Yeah. Where can people get that book?
Um, you should be able to get it at your local independent bookstore. Don't buy it from Amazon. Yeah, like Type should have it if you're in Toronto. All the good indies. What's that? Sorry.
Coach House?
Yes. Yeah. If you want to order it directly from the publisher and give them a treat and yourself, and look at all the great books that they have got, it's from Coach House Books.
Amazing.
Yeah. And on my website, actually, you can see more of the loose leaf marker versions as well.
Yeah, so if people want to find your work, I guess your website's probably the best place. Is Linda Besner, is it lindabesner.com?
Yeah.
Nice. Amazing. Well, thank you, Linda. It's been a delight. For our viewers, but also for me, just to be able to reconnect with you and hear about all the work that you're doing. And yeah,
Oh, well,
to
thank you
have
for thinking of me. It is like fun to be. It's fun to be like talking about art. I feel like I have not had like I know there's been so much like great virtual events and stuff, and I feel like I just have not partaken as much as I should. So I think this is like a good reminder for me that like it's so fun.
it's out there, it's happening. Yeah, and we've still got at least a few months to go here.
Yeah, I
We're
mean,
not too
yes.
late. We're not too late. And I imagine a lot of stuff will continue like beyond the pandemic, which is great. We'll be back in
Yeah,
person. There'll be these opportunities to connect with people that are far away, and I think it's wonderful. So
totally.
thank
Well,
you,
thank
Linda.
you guys.
I wanted to say a couple of things. Next week on Curtain Call, next Wednesday, Tamar Ilana is going to be interviewing ethnomusicologist Judith Cohen, who is just an incredible wealth of knowledge with a lot of wild stories. Yeah, so you'll definitely want to check that out. And also, I'm just going to pull something up here. Sorry, Linda, that you're going to just hang out and hear about all
No,
the
I'm
cool
into
stuff
it.
we've got going on. But on May 7th, we have another edition of Girls with Gear, which is sort of an electroacoustic night of music with different women performers. And this edition is on May 7th, featuring Nora Tutain. She's Moroccan from Montreal, and M. Shara, a local Toronto DJ. And basically, it's in this platform called Bramble, which is this virtual platform that's kind of like being at a festival. Like you're a little virtual person, and you can go in between different rooms and interact with other guests. When you're closer to other guests, you can talk to them, and then you can move towards different concerts. It's really cool. So that's going to be happening on May 7th. And if you want to check that out, you can visit our website, fabcollab.ca, and please follow us on Facebook, Instagram. Where else are we? Just there at FabCollab Live. at all of our socials. So thank you so much to everyone. And Linda, thanks for joining us. And we'll see you next week.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.